And I think you're right. My screen is just, yeah, that's better. Much better audio without my face. Unfortunately, no one gets my pretty face today. We are live. Three, two, one. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get your free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/literary roadhouse. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Maya.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Anais.
And on today's show, we are discussing Birdsong by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Literary Roadhouse is rated PG-13 for occasional potty mouth. If you have preteens or small children that you would like to listen to the show, please visit the iTunes store for the individual ratings or pre-listen to the episodes before sharing. And on our website, you can also leave comments and see our ratings. Ellie left a comment on our website about last week's story, To Build a Fire by Jack London. She said, I wish I could have properly engaged with this story, but I really struggled. Perhaps I was just turned off by the first few paragraphs. We got it. It's cold. Super cold. The coldest. Unlike Gerald, I didn't manage to get past the jarring of the word, and I think it put me in an uncompromising bad mood for the rest. For me, it just destroyed any tension, and I didn't feel any empathy, nor did I care when he died, whether you're supposed to feel for him or not. Shame, really.
Okay, I'm going to defend Jack London's use of the word cold over and over and over, because after we recorded that episode and both of you guys had mentioned it, and it had nagged at me, and I'm thinking to myself, why is Jack London repeating it's cold over and over? So I went back to the story and I highlighted all the times he said it's cold. And then I thought back to when I got caught in the cold in New York. And if you look at the story, he says it more often in the beginning, like a mantra that you would say when you're really, really freaking cold. But as he loses his touch with reality because his mind is going, because he's dying, he says it less often. And so it actually had a purpose, and I'm going to back him up on that.
And I'm going to back up Ellie and say, yeah, I know.
It's
Lots
cold.
Of cold. It's cold. Super cold.
That was a great comment, and thank you, Ellie, very much. We appreciate you participating on the website, and you're a great addition. So today's story is Birdsong by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I'm really excited about this story. I think this is our first African story, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And this story, it follows a woman who is sitting in traffic, and she looks to, I guess, her right, and she sees a woman who's very well dressed, well put together, obviously for money, who's staring at her. And as she's sitting in this traffic and looking at this woman, she's starting to recall this affair that she's just recently ended with a married Nigerian man. And his family is in the U.S., and throughout the course of the story, we really follow, when she met the man and this love affair developing and her realizing that it's not good for her, but not leaving. Like, she knows it's a bad situation, but she's not leaving. And towards the end of the story, this inside joke that they had that really cemented them together is unceremonially shared with his wife. And when she finds that, that's like her last straw. And she grasps onto her inner strength and she leaves him and she begins to look around and see all of the ways that she's unseen and unequal. And she really, I guess she puts her foot down. And so, yeah. What did everybody think about this story?
I can start. So I loved it. I loved a lot of things about it. We can get into exactly what I loved the most, but I have read Adichie before, so I already came into it knowing, like, I tend to love her voice and the way that she writes, and right off the bat I was like, yep, this is Adichie. Love it. I was right in it. I was seeing everything, and I really appreciate her as a writer.
How about you, Gerald?
Yeah, I was writing the story. I did enjoy it. I thought the ending was rather weak, to be honest. So,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of spoilt it for me. I'm just, yeah, but yeah, great description, great story, very very interesting. No problems. But yeah, I just felt a bit let down by the ending.
Yeah. For me, I adored this story. And unfortunately, because you're going on vacation, I literally just finished reading this story and it has not left me. As I was reading it, I was really emotionally affected by this story and almost to the point of tears at one point. I was just like, wow, it was so powerful as I was reading it. And this is the first story by her that I've read. So I'm heartened to know that this is her usual voice because it's definitely an author I'm going to be adding to my to be read pile. Uh, but let's go a little deeper. What was it that you did like about the story, Gerald?
Um, I I I enjoyed the there's lots of nice writing in it. There's lots of lovely little pieces in it which I thought really added to the story. She I just the first thing that really hit when she was at the sorry, brain's not fully engaged yet. When she was at the place where they went, and she was looking at the birds, and there was a magpie, and she imagined the magpie taking the wedding ring, which is sort of quite symbolic that the you know the it's that he would sort of put aside his marriage for her, um, and things like his face is full of overseas, which is I
Yeah.
loved a bit of description there, and I never cried elegantly. That's really good. Some lovely writing,
Hmm.
and she had a co-worker called Gerald, so that was brilliant.
Well, you can always like a story with a coworker named Gerald, I guess.
Of course.
And how about you, Annie's? What was it that you liked the most about the story?
Um, well, I mean, I loved everything, but one thing that struck me very early on is the way that she's describing Lagos and Nigerian culture. It was done in a way where it felt sort of incidental to how she's
Mhm.
going through plot and character. Like there's no point where she's like standing there and saying, and this and this is that, because it almost feels like, and I'm not in a good position to know if this is true or not, but to me it felt like she's writing this for people who already understand Lagos, for
Yeah.
Nigerians, right? Maybe that's just because I suddenly felt as I was reading it like, oh, I feel like I already knew this. No, I didn't know this. I'm learning this as I'm reading it, but it's so intimately and well written that by the time she gets to that point, I feel like I'm already a part of this. I understand it, and I really like that.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. When I first started reading the story, I started underlining these beautiful nuggets of, at one point I actually wrote in my notes poetics because I could tell that this is a writer that really pays attention to actual words. I read a lot of writers that are focused on story and character, but it seems like a lot of writers aren't really focused on the actual words that they're using to portray those things. And there was such an attention to the words that reminded me of poetry, but after a point, I had to stop because I was like underlining so many sentences that were just magnificent sentences. Right from the very beginning, she was the kind of woman I imagined my lover's wife was, a woman for whom things are done. That just really paints such a specific picture. But there was something else, and I think this goes to what you were saying about uh, writing for people that already know Lagos, because she is an African writer writing for Africans. And I think that's why she's so popular. She's not an African writer writing for Western audience. Western audience loves her because she's so wonderful, but this she's writing in a really natural and honest way. And she captured something I haven't seen a lot in literature. And I've seen this, when I watch YouTube videos or whatever, all around the world, the African diaspora has been dispersed, post slavery, post immigration, we're all over the place. But there are these little cultural nuggets that you'll find in Black people in France, Black people in the Middle East, Black people in Japan, Black people in Canada. There are these little things that we all share. And every once in a while, I'll see those things and it makes me smile. And for me, the the way she described the weave and the lady like hitting her head because it itches, and how one woman is the weave is wearing her but the other woman owns her weave, and the woman that owns her weave is the woman whose weave isn't even trying to be natural. Like, that little nugget was just, it made me smile because I know this woman, and it doesn't matter what country she's from, know this woman. And that was something that I just loved about this story. And then there was a universality in the specificity of her emotions, because any woman that's been in this situation, whether you've been with a married man or just a man that you know is bad for you, can relate, at least on some level, to a lot of the emotions she's going through. So I think those are the things that really stood out for me and immediately sucked me in.
Yeah, and as you're talking about sort of things that rang true for you, there were several things that as I read them, um, it just sort of like struck that chord, resonated, and I forget who said that a writer's job is to at least sort of like write one moment of truth, and there was
That was
three.
Hemingway.
It was Hemingway. So
It was Gerald's wonderful Hemingway. He said, just write one true thing.
that Hemingway is so quotable.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were three things that I would just, one was when she realizes that the man uses the same sort of cutesy sign off with his wife in the text message. So they send text messages to each other, cock with the dick, which is their inside joke, and he does the same thing with his wife. And then that feeling where she says she felt sagged, she felt slack like a stringless marionette. And I was like, I know that feeling. I know that feeling. I've had it. That was just beautifully done. The other thing when she's explaining to him the rituals of distrust, the stories we tell ourselves about urban living. And in Costa Rica, that's very, prominent here. Like, if you stop at a red light and you're a woman alone, you should have your purse in your lap because, like, they'll break a window to take it out of the car seat. And, like, everyone knows a friend of a friend of a friend that happened to, but nobody that I know has had it happen to them. So it's like, and there's all these sort of stories about this will happen, that will happen.
Well, even outside Costa Rica, I remember when I was in New Orleans and I went to New York, I was told to make sure I carried my own luggage out of Penn Station, because if somebody else carried my luggage and I didn't tip them, they may throw my luggage back down.
Yeah. Which I think is a very city living type of thing, right? Like, there's just like this inherent distrust of everybody around you. And
we have the same thing here, and in fact, even if I go into a big town, well, particularly London, I will lock the doors. And it's not just a woman thing. It's just you don't want someone to jump in and grab your bag or try and steal you. It's just, I think it's just something. Yeah, and like Anais says, there's someone knows someone who had it happen. So you think, okay, I'll protect against that. And it probably never happens, but
Exactly.
This actually reminds me. My grandfather used to invent his own rituals of distrust, which I think is the best. He would. So, for example, once he wouldn't let us open the sunroof of the car because he was afraid that some hooligans would come through, throw in a bag of marijuana, the cops would stop us, and we would get arrested for possession. Other level.
Story, wow.
I love that. I've got tears. I'm sorry.
You had many. That is but one.
Oh my goodness. I love your family so much. They're just awesome.
I like this, the two-story narrative that sort of, excuse me, that completely separate her work life and her personal life. So these two stories sort of go along in parallel and then cross over or touch occasionally, and I quite like that. It's just sort of it ties the stories together as they're told, and I quite like that. She's very good. She's a very, very good writer.
And I like the parallel between the affair and the work life, which was very subtle. But when she started finding her self-worth in the affair, when she was getting ready to leave, suddenly she's in the office like, why do only the women have to cut the cake, even though we're not the most junior? And suddenly she's like finding her self-worth and questioning things and being assertive in the office as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that scene in the restaurant when she asked the waiter, how come you never greet me? And he doesn't answer her. And he looks to her boyfriend, I guess, for instructions on how to respond. That broke my heart. That was the point where I was like, whoa, I need more time with this story because this story is just ripping my heart to shreds right now. Uh, yeah, that was just such a powerful moment for me.
And when she went to the supermarket to get the meat pies, and
Oh,
the
yes.
driver wouldn't stop at the door, but stops at the gate, and
Yeah, it was
and
such like a slap.
yeah, and she was wondering whether that was because she was the other woman, and but then she begins to realise that it's actually because she is a woman, and again, there's parallels to even this sort of comfortable life that we live here. That people will address me rather than my wife in certain circumstances, and it's like she doesn't exist. That I'm the man, therefore I make the decisions. And one thing she really hates is when you get a letter that says Mr. and Mrs. G something, and they
It just
you know,
gets on her
she,
every last nerve.
because I'm here too. It's not. So it's sort of women's identity, I guess, and
Yeah.
and uh, and and even today that people are struggling to women are struggling to sort of give themselves and make sure people can treat them as individuals, not just some appendage to a man.
And I think this especially rung true for me because I've had the experience of being a much younger woman dating fairly powerful men anyway. And I've had the experience of going to a restaurant where I'm going to pay, I give them my credit card, and they give the receipt to him to sign.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm like,
exactly.
hello, come on now here, and having touched on that, I'm just like, I cannot imagine how much more potent it would be, to be in a country where men are even more,
Mm.
there's even more inequality, and to be with a man who is married. I had trouble just having an age difference, you know, and so I'm just like, wow, and yet I was still, it really brought me right there to the moment, which brings me to the question: what is the theme of the story? What is the author talking about in the story? Is it about love? Like, what is it?
I don't know.
You didn't
Yeah,
pick up a theme? I definitely
yeah.
picked up one.
Go on.
Well, it's funny. I actually have several themes that I wrote and then crossed out because none of them rang true. And in the end, it's almost like, for me, it's a story of discovering self-worth. And because she's a woman, that inevitably becomes it becomes a feminist theme. I mean, when she was going on about why am I cutting the cake, I was like, she is now Sandberg leaning in. Like that's happening right now. Um, but also in the relationship. And it was done in a way where she's feisty and she's assertive and she's smart, but she is unabashedly feminine. Like, it isn't one of those stories where the woman becomes stronger because she's become more masculine. No, she's
Yeah.
still very much feminine, which I always appreciate.
Yeah, I agree with you. For me, it was even more than just, finding self-worth. I found the story to really be about power because there were so many lines in towards the beginning of the story where she's expressing her lack of power. In the beginning, why is she attracted to this man? Like, truly, why is she attracted to this man? She's attracted to him because he's powerful, because he woos her, because he's got an elegance about him. Those are like in the realm of, pigeons fluffing their feathers and dancing around. That's like a mating dance. It's like, I'm powerful and elegant and I have lots of money. And and as the story goes on, those she starts to talk more about her lack of power. So in the beginning, it's about his power, and she's attracted to it, and then it becomes suffocating, and then she has to recognize that she has no power, and she has to do that in order to gain power. And that is an intrinsically feminist theme, but I think that's also a human theme, because for whatever reason, many people, man and woman, can have the experience of not having power, whether you don't have power because you're poor, or whether you just don't have power because you have low self-esteem or whatever. And I appreciate the fact that she is feisty and she's smart, even though she doesn't have power, because a lot of times when you talk about women without power, they're always meek or they're mousy or whatever, and she's not like that. But still, she has this issue, which to me rang even more true. And so when she reclaims her power, it's her inner nature that allows her to do that because she does have the strength in order to deal with it, whereas another woman might recognize her lack of power and then just fold.
Mm. Yeah, I see that now. I can see that it's mainly sort of feminist issues, and yeah, what you say about lack of power comes through time and time again about how she's just this figure that doesn't really matter. It's quite strange to have it sort of spelled out to you as a reader, how impotent she really is in that sort of life, in both her work life and her personal life, and yeah, I was reading it thinking, really, and that sort of struck me as being quite powerful to as part of the story to me as the reader. That illustration of how little she's thought of.
Yeah. And even in the ways that she participates in her lack of power without even realizing it. There's a line where she says, I stared at him stunned until he drove away. And then I began to think of all I could have said, what I could have shouted back. And I think that's really common to the female experience especially. But all humans that feel a lack of power, that feeling of someone does you wrong and then you stand there and you want to say something but you don't. And then afterwards you're like, oh, I could have said this, oh, I could have said that. And it's a mark of not feeling empowered enough to say those things so that you don't even consider it until after it's too late, And that really struck me.
Yeah, and there was sort of one line that sort of spoke to something else about this, because it's about power more broadly. I agree. And then also there's a sort of portrait of, because in many ways the affair is kind of standard of powerful men who have mistresses, the way that
definitely.
it plays out.
Definitely.
And there's one line that captures that beautifully when she writes, I knew then that he could not possibly see me, the inconvenient reality of me. Instead, all he saw was himself in an exciting game.
Yep. And that right there
Affairs,
is why
in a nutshell.
every time a politician gets caught with somebody, I'm like, why is this even news? Like, all powerful men. Powerful men have been doing this since cavemen. I'm sure there was like a head caveman that went around screening everybody else's cave women. It's powerful men. That's just what they do. And I'm just like, why is this news? Why are people complaining? You want a powerful guy in there, you got to take the full package, and that's just part of the package. Which sounds horrible, and maybe it sounds, fatalistic or whatever. Can we talk a little bit about the humor in this story? This story, because for all of its somber, important, serious theme, there were several points where literally I laughed out loud. I loved the humor in this story. There was one point when she was wondering how this fancy woman in this fancy car, how her car doesn't have any scratches or dents or anything on it, even though everybody else in the entire country has a dented vehicle. And she says perhaps whenever her car was hit, a mechanic descends from the sky and made the dent disappear. And I started dying.
Yeah, I have a note about the whole fertility biscuits anecdote. It was hilarious.
It was absolutely hilarious.
And then there's that one line where the woman asks, but it's really biscuits. Like, this isn't some other weird scare where the priest is sort of taking them out back and just like, kicking it with them. No, it's really biscuits.
It must be so, because of the stuff I read, but that was my first thought. I thought, oh yeah, biscuits, yeah. No, it's really biscuits.
Oh yeah, that was great. Between the humor and there were so many distinctly African touches. Like she describes a man as sucking their teeth, and that is an expression I have heard almost exclusively from Africans and people from the Caribbean, and that gave me a chuckle. It was just so beautiful. Oh, so beautifully done. I love this story on more levels than I can imagine. So for
Um,
all of our love of this story, did anybody have anything they didn't love about the story? I know Gerald did.
Mm, yeah,
Dum da dum dum.
the ending. I just there was
What was it
no
about the ending?
there was no resolution. There was no. It just sort of to me. I don't know. It was. I think it would have. It just needed a couple of sentences or something to
To make you
show
happy?
to make me happy, which is all I want. It's very simple. No, just something that would sort of show that she recognised that she was, she was becoming more empowered, or something like that. It was
So
just
her yelling at her boss wasn't enough? Totally picking.
yeah, yeah. um, no, but the actual ending where she she's still in the traffic jam and the other woman the other car drives off and you just think yeah and it just didn't for me it just didn't
See,
work.
I love endings like that. I'm like, life doesn't give me endings, so why should a story give me like a neat, tidy ending with a bow on top?
So what you're saying is I'm wrong.
Of course, after all the times you've told me I was wrong.
well, and I
Hey, I
think,
even won a story when you were still here, so there.
Yeah.
but it was against me, not Gerald. Gerald is
Yeah.
undefeated.
So you're empowered now, is that it, Maya?
Totally empowered. But I think that's common. I think a lot of people are really uncomfortable with super open-ended stories, and this was definitely on the more open-ended side.
Mm.
But if you look at it again through the lens of power, there's another character here who has a lot of power, which is the wife. We never actually see her in a scene, but you see the power of her through the fact that he's constantly sending her text messages and answering her calls secretly and never missing one. The driver, Emmanuel, right? There's that line where through him she can see that this woman still has a lot of clout. And I think at the end, that little smile that she gives, the
Is her
woman with the
power, yeah.
perfect Brazilian we, yeah, that little smile is, yeah, I'm the wife and I won. I win. Like that's like she feels like she won, which I'm sure, the narrator's like, yeah, okay, you can keep him.
Yeah,
But
she's a stand-in for the wife, really. She's a stand-in for a super powerful woman that would be the type of woman that could be this
mhm.
husband. And I think you're right. The story isn't about her. So the resolution isn't the resolution of that. The resolution is of the narrator coming to terms with her power and blowing up at her and saying something about her, staring at her. That is the resolution because the actual story isn't about the other woman in the car.
Yeah, I would just add to that the element where the wife has power as well, and you see it through the way that the husband and the driver behaves, and even the way that the narrator behaves. There's certain buttons she will not push because she knows that if she asks this guy, me or her, it's gonna be her. And I
Yeah.
think that little smile at the end talks about the third element of power here.
I mean, do you also like one of the things that struck me about the other woman because she obviously has power. She has social capital, let's say. Um, is even though she has a social capital, she doesn't entirely have power, and I think this was hinted at in the way her weave was described. When she talked about the fact that Chikawadu owns her weave in the way that the woman with Brazilian hair doesn't, and that is a hint that she doesn't really own her own self either. So even though she's this powerful woman and she has the husband, her husband is still doing whatever he wants on the side. She has no control over that. If she opens her mouth and says, "You need to stop cheating on me," do you think he's going to stop? No. And she has to put on all these airs and wear all these fancy clothes because that's what's expected of her to be in that social position. And so in a way, I kind of see like a reflection. Like a clouded mirror between the narrator and the woman in the car. They're different. They have different problems, and they're both powerful and not powerful in differing ways. Does that make sense? I'm not sure I'm getting that across. I know I've read this story way too soon to really coagulate it, but I see like a reflection between the two, so I don't see her as being all powerful.
No, I think I know I would agree with you. There's a lot of stuff she's clearly not powerful about. She can't leave this man, even though he's hurting her by having these affairs, and she's kind
But
of
we don't know that. That's an assumption.
yeah. But I think that's the safe assumption that you're supposed to make when married women are being cheated. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like
That
the
is the safe
affair is
Western
kind of
assumption. I will argue with you on that because I've heard women say flat out that they don't care if their husband has affairs. That's just the way men are as long as they come home.
yeah. And I've heard that as well. But sometimes doesn't it sound a little bit like they're masking a pain that they know they can't deal with any other way because the divorce
Some
is
and
like
some
sometimes
not.
I think it's genuine, but yeah, yeah.
I
Um,
mean, if you grew
but
up
if
in a
this
culture
guy is
where
going
men
to
are
the
always
lengths of hiding
cheating,
it, is it just pride?
I think sometimes, like, sometimes it's a question of, it's not the cheating, it's losing face. So, I don't care if you sleep around because we're married for a whole bunch of other reasons besides just sex, but I don't want you flaunting it. I don't want everybody knowing because that reflects on me. It has to
Yeah.
do with what's seen, the whole like theory that, maybe Hillary and Bill had an agreement and what he really got in trouble with was for getting caught, like that kind of thing. And there is some of that in other cultures. And as someone who has friends on the edge and has been around a lot of poly couples, I'm not quick to assume that the wife, is all that upset. As long as what she expects is taken care of. She doesn't even live there. And that's also really common when you have spouses that live in two different areas. A lot of times there are unsaid agreements. And so I'm not quick to make that assumption. But there's something in the way that the woman keeps staring at her that tells me that there's something there. I'm not going to make the assumption that it's because of jealousy, but there's a lack of power and a sort of recognition between the two women because the woman keeps staring at her for some reason. Or maybe it's all in the narrator's head. Maybe it's in her imagination, reflection of her guilt. What do you think?
I don't think the narrator is guilty at all. Like, I think if she ever had to confront the woman, she'd be like, in the moment ashamed. But I don't think she walks around with this overwhelming guilt. I think she walks around more with regret that she stayed in that for so long.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Gerald?
Yeah. I didn't quite understand that, and in a way, I didn't really understand the point of the other woman in the car. Sort of didn't for me. It didn't really fit in with the rest of the narrative,
Mm-hmm.
and she, because I think she wrote at one point, she was wondering if this was the wife that had come to see the husband or something, but I suppose that sort of comes back to my dislike of the ending. It seems as though she's there, but it's not really. I just didn't quite understand that sort of
Yeah.
staring and introspective analysis of the woman in the other car in the traffic jam. It
Well,
just
I'll
didn't
give it
quite
to
work.
you. The part with the other woman didn't entirely fit. But because it didn't entirely fit and because of how well the rest of the story was written, I thought that the woman must be a metaphor or a representation, something symbolic. So it's not really about the woman, but it's about what the woman represents. But I came to that assumption based on the fact that it was so specific and the writing in the rest of the story was so well done and not sloppy that that woman must represent something. I don't think it's the guy's wife. I really don't.
No, no.
But I think there was a recognition between the wife and the girlfriend, a sameness in their lack of power, but at the same time, a recognition that one still has more power and that will always have more power. That's how I took that interaction to mean. But you're right, it did prompt more thinking on my part because it was very like abrupt.
Yeah, but I think maybe because she's a because she's in the back of the car, therefore she has a driver, and the thing about the car not being damaged, and so you know this woman has access to wealth in some means or other, and perhaps that she's recognizing that neither of them have power really.
Yeah.
So I can see that now. Yeah.
What did you guys think about the character development as far as, both the narrator, her co-workers? What did you guys think?
Anais?
Yeah.
Did we lose her? Okay, well then I'll start.
No. I your thing kept moving. I thought you were still speaking. I was going to say that there was one thing about the coworker that I really enjoyed. So the coworker, she was the one who had the simple certainties, who knew right and wrong. It was judging her, saying, "Oh, I would never open my legs for a married man." But then at the end, when the coworker knows that she's left the guy, she's still sympathetic and she sees it in her expression. And I like that because I feel like I'm kind of intense and I might be that friend that people come and talk to and they're like, "Oh, you're judging me with your like simple moral compass." But at the end, I like to believe like I'm still very sympathetic, and I'm like, but I could have just as easily gotten trapped in that. Like anyone can, if you push the right buttons, I think. I don't know. Like I don't know how I would react in that situation. I tend to be more sympathetic, and I like seeing that in the coworker as well. I guess I was like, "Oh, that's me."
I think also because so often we see women tearing each other down, both in literature and on TV or even in real life. And it was really nice to see women really supporting one another in a very natural way. I thought that was really beautiful. And it was well done. I loved all the characters in the story as far as they all felt really real. Even Emmanuel, the driver, like, I couldn't picture him, but he felt truthful. He felt honest to me. I really enjoyed all the characters in this story.
Speaking of Emmanuel, I feel like I'm doing my mother a disservice if I'm not bringing in her type of like, how she always invents a story behind the story.
Okay, let's hear about Emmanuel.
Here we go. I hope I do my mom proud. Mom, please put in the comments if I guessed your thinking correctly. This is now like a game. The woman in the Jeep is the wife. You know how I know? She's being driven by who? Emmanuel. Emmanuel told her that the woman in the beat-up car is the other woman that her husband had been keeping in the house. There you go.
Oh.
That does sound. That sounds
like her.
Right.
Yep.
But I don't believe it because Emmanuel knows his place and he wouldn't just bulge.
I mean, maybe it's just with the look. Maybe they just have this like unspoken code. There's a story behind a story.
Yeah, and she'd recognise the car, wouldn't she? And then she'd look for the driver, but yeah.
Or maybe it was the new car that was supposed to be hers.
Ooh. Oh. Yeah, the car that he gave him. Now you're turning into my mom with the stories behind stories.
Oh my god.
Amazing.
Oh, we're such a mess. Was there anything else you guys wanted to talk about with this story?
Yeah, I had like one nitpicky thing. So I read the entire story, loved it. I was completely hooked, never looked at the scroll bar. And then I scroll back to the top and I see the title and I'm like, really? Like, I keep forgetting the title. It's like really nitpicky. Like, I mean, it's just because her and the guy would look at birds in the trees. Like that is the least of this.
Okay, here's how I see the title. Okay, not just because they bonded over. Birds were like a regular thing throughout their relationship, but also the way he courted her was very much, he was like, I don't know, like a peacock courting her. And then they had the thing with the cock with the dick, and they had the thing with the magpies, and the thing with the other birds, and then the leaving, and the whole thing about birds not having penises and I kind of feel like this was a theme and it kind of went. But also, there's something very melodic about the language, and whenever I talk to people from Africa, there's something very melodic about the speech pattern. And when you go to places in the U.S., you go to chocolate cities like Atlanta or New Orleans, you still hear that. There's something very musical. And so the idea of, the bird being this huge theme, and then the song and the music, I like the title.
Yeah, I didn't sort of, until now I didn't think much about it, but I think I'm with Anais. It doesn't really fit. It's not. There's nothing about the bird song in particular that sort of resonates within the story. I think, yes, the birds, and yes, the courtship.
But it's not about the bird song. This entire relationship was a bird song. See, I'm just seeing metaphor.
No, yeah, I mean, I totally get your defense of it, and it's completely correct. But I get that. For me, the title's still completely forgettable. Like, even though I understand that, I still just what was the name of it? It was a great story, but it's like...
You know what, though? On none of her titles, I looked at, a list of her short stories and her novels, and every time I have to look up her, because none of her titles stick in my head.
It's funny. So I read Purple Hibiscus. Okay, there are hibiscuses in the story, but no, it's not even a major part of the story. I think she does tend to do that. The one title of hers that I always remember is Americana with an H at the end. That's a good title, and it's getting made into a movie, probably because the title's so great and the book.
Is Oprah producing it? Sorry. If you say yes, I'm gonna die. Actually.
No, I think Lupita Nyong'o bought the rights to it after her Oscar win, and she made all that money. Yeah,
that would be awesome. That would make me really
excited. She's one of the owners. Yeah.
Okay, so how are we gonna rate this puppy? Want to start with Gerald?
Yeah, I like last week. I sort of had a figure in my head, and then listening to what you've said, I thought, well, maybe, I missed a little bit there, and then I've gone back and I've written a number down, and that number is 4.5.
Ooh. How about you, Anais?
5.5.
Whoa.
I really liked it. I mean, there's not much else to say. But the heavens didn't open, and the birds and the angels didn't sing, as you always say.
Well, they didn't fix your car.
The birds did sing in the title.
The heavens opened, and the angels burst into crying jags of tears. I'm giving it a 6.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Woo!
I was sitting reading this, and my chest was so heavy, and I almost cried on 2 occasions. My eyes were tearing up, and I had to stop reading, and then I laughed out loud. I was like, wow, if you make me laugh out loud, and then a few sentences later you've got me near tears, you've earned a 6. So
very good.
She gets a 6 from me.
Good. We found Maya's 6. I feel like finding each other's 6s.
Yeah,
I think this is my second 6, actually.
No.
Because I gave it 6 just the other week. Yeah, I think so.
I don't think so. I gave it 6. I think I was the first 6.
Yeah, you were the first 6, so now I've had a 6.
So we've got to find a 6 for Anais now.
Yep, got to find a 6 for Anais.
It'll happen.
Cheeky.
Cookie.
It'll come. And what did we get last week on last week's story?
So last week we discussed To Build a Fire by Jack London, and commenters gave it a 2.
No.
Ouch. Now, because we're reviewing this story a little bit early, I am so hopeful that somebody will come into the comments that like the story, because they really didn't like the story.
I know who the someone is, too.
Your dad?
No, it's Todd. Todd still hasn't commented, and he's pretty good.
No, I don't think Todd's going to like it either. I don't think so.
We need to know.
I bet you he's going to give it a 3.
I'm so going to log in as a
Doesn't he live in Canada? I think he likes snow. We'll find out. We'll find out soon enough.
Maybe he's sick and freaking tired of snow. He'll downgrade it just for the snow.
He'll downgrade it everybody knows you shouldn't do this.
For God's sake.
Totally. Okay, so it's time to choose next week's story. What are you guys submitting for next week's story?
Ooh, well, I haven't got one because I'm not going to be here, so I.
No, you still submit for the next
Oh,
person.
jeez. Um,
Well, find a
so
story real quick. I'll cut this out.
yeah, so
Find a story.
It's the whatever. The one I said, Edgar Allan Poe.
Ooh, I haven't read any Edgar Allan Poe.
Maya, since this is all being cut out, does Gerald sound very low to you?
Yeah, I'm gonna bump him up though. I'm fine with it because usually he sounds too high.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's happened is that I didn't have the mixer turned on when I opened up Audacity, so I've been trying to fiddle. So I'm using the built-in mic on the computer, so it's
I've had to
that's why it's
play with my
different.
volume because at the level I normally have it at, Maya's loud and I can't hear you, and I have to bump it up, and then Maya's too loud, so I've been like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna be a little weird.
yeah.
yeah. That's. I had to turn the built-in mic down.
It's
So
okay.
now
We'll
it's
figure it out. As
Yeah.
as long you sound clear, so as long as it's not totally bad when I get it, it's fine.
okay. Just bear with me. Sorry about this.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm just worried I might
Yeah.
have,
This just happens when your brain is already on vacation. It's already in that RV.
It's
Yeah.
it's not,
for the people watching the YouTube, this
I
is
still
a
can't believe they have RVs in Europe. I really thought that only Americans were that tacky.
motorhomes. Motorhomes.
Right, I have a story.
Okay.
Okay, and for next week's story, I'm going to put forward The Man of the Crowd by Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay. And I'm putting in What We're Sure Of by Brandy Reisenweber.
What we're sure of?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. So we are doing a U.S. President's trivia.
Oh, God, no.
This is payback for all those times. Because I win so rarely, I have to really, enjoy this. So, who was the only president to serve more than 2 terms? George Washington, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, or Ulysses S. Grant?
Do we just answer if we know?
Yep, just answer, and then there's
FDR.
25 questions.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt?
What do you think, Gerald?
Who's the first one you said? Was it Washington?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll go for Washington.
And the answer is Franklin D. Roosevelt.
I have an edge, though. I
Nice
feel like
one,
it's
that
not
one.
fair. I had to take American history in high school.
What? They made us they made us tell you, U.S. geography, world geography. Come on now. It's even. like I know any of the countries in Europe that aren't France, Germany, and the UK. Just saying. Who was the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms? Woodrow Wilson, Grover Cleveland, Theodore Roosevelt, or Ronald Reagan?
Cleveland.
I think
How
it was
about you?
Theodore Roosevelt. I think so, but I'm blanking.
And the answer was Cleveland.
Whoa!
See,
Wasn't-
you were sticking up for Gerald, but what you don't know is they have this awesome educational system. They probably know more U.S. history than we
I
do.
thought Cleveland was the one that was really obese and got stuck in the tub. There was one president that got stuck in the tub.
That's a good bit of trivia.
Yeah, if I can
I
remember
don't
which
know
one.
that trivia. It says Grover Cleveland served 2 non-consecutive terms and is counted chronologically as both the 22nd and the 24th. So there you go.
Wow.
Who was the oldest elected president? James Buchanan, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Zachary Taylor, or Ronald Reagan?
I would say Reagan.
Yeah, I want to say Reagan.
Both of you are correct.
Woo!
Who was the first president to live in the White House? Andrew Jackson, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, or John Adams?
I'll say Adams.
What was the one before? What were they again? I missed one.
Andrew Jackson, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, or John Adams?
Oh my God! I think it's Jefferson or Adams. Adams.
And the answer is Adams.
Whoa.
I knew you guys would do good.
Yeah.
Who was the first president born outside the contiguous United States? Franklin Pierce, Barack Obama, William Howard Taft, and Benjamin Harrison.
I think it's Obama.
How about you?
Harrison.
It was Barack Obama.
Whoa.
Yeah, because Hawaii
that's
didn't used to be. That was the whole thing where people were like, he's not a U.S. citizen. They're like, well, actually he is, but Hawaii.
No. I feel that for some reason I thought it was like the first territories, like the first, after the Louisiana Purchase. I thought we were talking about going west. Okay.
Go west, young.
Not to feel dumb. I thought I was just asking like who.
It's okay.
that
It
west?
happens to the best of us. At least I didn't pull the Mensa quiz. I looked at it. Before the 12th Amendment was passed in 1804, how was the vice president determined? President and vice president were voted separately. The vice president was appointed by the president. There were no official vice presidents before 1804. The presidential candidate receiving the second largest number of electoral votes. How do you guys think the vice president?
I'm going to go with the no official vice president.
How about you, Anais?
The one who came in second place.
You were right.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. It was a dumb system because they hated each other.
Yeah. Can you imagine now? Oh my God, President Obama or Vice President Romney? Just saying it, I can't keep a straight face. That would have been bad. I wonder if they got rid of that because of the dude that tried to kill somebody. No, I think that was a congressman. Let me see here. Which U.S. president signed the treaty to purchase Alaska from Russia? Andrew Johnson, James Buchanan, Ulysses S. Grant, or Andrew Jackson? Who bought Alaska from Russia?
Oh, I should know this. I'm going to say Grant.
Johnson. I don't know, I'm guessing.
You got it right, Anais.
Woo! I knew it wasn't Grant. I knew it wasn't Jackson, so I had 50-50.
Okay. Now I'm only going to go to 10, so we've got 3 more questions.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Who was the first president to appear on TV? Harry Truman, John F. Kennedy, Franklin D. Roosevelt, or Dwight D. Eisenhower?
That's a tricky one. I'm going to say Eisenhower.
I don't know if it was
I actually
FDR
know
or
this one. Gonna give up? Gonna just
Yeah,
pick
no,
one?
I don't want to give up. I said I know Kennedy, like the big deal was he looked so good on TV. But was he first? Truman?
It was Roosevelt.
Oh.
It was Roosevelt, okay.
Yeah, it couldn't be Kennedy because then Kennedy and Nixon would have appeared at the same time, and that wouldn't have been the first.
Yeah. Well, I remember there was this one anecdote about Roosevelt that when he would give speeches because he was in a wheelchair, he would hold himself up on his forearms because he didn't want people to know that he was wheelchair bound, so it looked like he was standing.
Yeah.
Very good.
Obese trivia, podium trivia.
Who was the first president to be impeached? Who was the first president to be impeached? Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, Calvin Coolidge, Richard Nixon?
Could you repeat the question? It cut off for me.
Who was the first president to be impeached? Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, Calvin Coolidge, or Richard Nixon?
I'm going to say Nixon.
Coolidge?
For both of you, it was
Oh.
Andrew Johnson.
Oh, really?
And here's the last question, and then I'm done torturing you for today.
Hooray.
Who was the only unanimously elected president by the Electoral College? George Washington, Ronald Reagan, Franklin D. Roosevelt, or John F. Kennedy?
I'm
What
gonna
was the
say
question again? Sorry, cut out.
Who was the only unanimously elected president by the Electoral College? George Washington, Ronald Reagan, Franklin D. Roosevelt, or JFK?
I'm gonna say Kennedy because one of the answers has to be Kennedy.
I'm going to go with FDR again because he's so great.
Neither of you are right. It was George Washington. Of course, the first one would be the only one because we're too divided.
I didn't
People
even
wanted
hear
him
Washington.
to be king.
I only heard 3 options.
Oh.
Well.
Oh no.
I mean, it's fine. I would have stuck with FDR because he's my bro.
You're bro. Well, it doesn't matter because Anais won. Gerald got 4 correct, and Anais got 5 correct. Good job, both of you. These were hard questions. I don't think I would have done as well. They were not easy questions. So, Anais, what will we be reading?
So we're reading What We're Sure Of by Brandy Reisenweber. To join the discussion, visit literaryroadhouse.com. I also encourage you to leave a quick iTunes review and tell us your favorite short stories so far. Your reviews encourage us and help others find our podcast. Don't forget to tell your friends, and until next time, read a good story.
Do, do, do.